Smart to chew on. The Lunchroom on RCI. Monday to Friday, 12:45 to 2 p.m. The Lunchroom. Informative, enlightening, provocative, engaging. The Lunchroom on RCI. Food for thought. The station that gives you, more lunch.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Lunchroom on Radio Caribbean International for Thursday, the 26th of February, 2026. And we are, of course, on 101.1 FM radio. And you can also get us at our website, rcistlucia.com, and on Facebook Live. Just search for the official page of Radio Caribbean International. I'm your host, Calix George Jr. Of course, if you want to call in to tell us what's on your plate today, the number to do so is 452-3046. Again, 452-3046. And you can also reach us on our WhatsApp number. That is 284-6001. Again, 284-6001. A look back in time on this day. We go back into the year 1616, a very long time ago, when the Roman Inquisition delivered an injunction to Galileo demanding he abandon his belief in heliocentrism, which stated that the Earth and planets revolved around the sun. Of course, he was eventually proven right. 1797, the Bank of England issued its first £1 note. 1815, on this day, February the 26th, Napoleon Bonaparte and his supporters left Elba to start a 100-day reconquest of France. 1885, on this day, the Berlin Conference gave Congo to Belgium and Nigeria to the United Kingdom. 1935, on this day, radar, radio detection and ranging, was first demonstrated by Robert Watson Watt and Arnold Wilkins in Daventry, England. 1991, on this day, coalition planes bombed Iraqi forces retreating from Kuwait, killing hundreds and creating the so-called Highway of Death during the Gulf War. And in 2005, on this day, President of Egypt, Hosni Mubarak, ordered the constitution changed to allow multi-candidate presidential elections, asking the Egyptian parliament to amend Article 76 of the Egyptian constitution. We now move on to our dish of the day.
Serving now, the Daily Dish.
And welcome back to our program here at the Lunchroom. We do hope that everybody is having a very blessed day. Now, of course, very topical right now is the state of play in our region with so many different moving parts. Believe it or not, the Caribbean once again being thrust into a very active stage for the play out of geopolitics. And this time, quite a lot hinges on the largest island in the Caribbean archipelago, that of Cuba. A very, very long history there with Cuba, one of the first colonies of Spain during that period of colonization, which goes way back to that of none other than Christopher Columbus. And they have certainly been seeing the changing of hands and the impact of imperialism for a very long time in Cuba. And this again is playing out. And of course, the intensification of U.S. efforts at effectively placing Cuba in a stranglehold, taking away its much needed, what effectively for most countries is their lifeline, what they breathe in, that of oil and gas, which is very much necessary for driving vehicles and the turbines of power plants. That is under tremendous strain right now in Cuba in terms of that lack of oil coming into the country. Of course, Cuba is a producer of oil in the south in particular, but certainly not to the extent and to the quantities that it can supply and support its population of over 10 million inhabitants. And of course, it has depended very heavily on the support of Venezuela in this regard. Suggestions coming, of course, that despite U.S. efforts, there are humanitarian efforts at play. Countries effectively braving these embargoes. In the case of Russia, for example, they in fact have been reported to have sent an oil tanker to Cuba, and that bringing across over 100,000 metric tons of oil for the population over there, and it is in fact under the watch of a Russian naval ship. And of course, they've also made out statements indicating that they will not be taking on any aggression, and have given warning effectively to U.S. interests. Also playing out there, a very interesting situation where a vessel apparently seeming to be coming out of the United States, entering Cuban, well, a private vessel that is, entering Cuban waters, and exchange occurring, shots fired from that vessel, and shots returned by Cuban military interests, and effectively 4 individuals being killed on that vessel in Cuban waters. Interesting story developing there as well. But of course, closer to home, that of the CARICOM heads of government meeting over in St. Kitts into what I guess you could say is its 3rd day. And of course, lots of interest still being had over some of the statements coming out of the opening session, the opening ceremony of that meeting. I believe we have a clip available which effectively gives some capture of the highlights, some of the highlights of statements coming out of the likes of the prime ministers of Jamaica, as well as Trinidad and Tobago. Of course, for a very long time, those 2 countries dominating CARICOM affairs, and they both seem to be somewhat in alignment in terms of their particular interests at play right now in respect of recent American and ongoing American activity, military activity in the Caribbean Sea. Let's take a listen to this clip.
The cracks that appeared in recent months resurfaced on Tuesday night as the Caribbean Community CARICOM leaders gathered under a drone-style facility for the ceremonial opening of the 50th regular meeting. Jamaica's Prime Minister Andrew Holness set the ball rolling by reminding his colleagues as well as the international community that the 15-member CARICOM is and has never been claimed to be a political union. As a result, he says, the CARICOM Treaty does not mandate a singular foreign policy or a supernatural authority.
The question before us, therefore, is not whether CARICOM can endure, for we have and we will, but whether it can deliver for our people with urgency and relevance in a rapidly changing world. For decades, an idealized narrative around Caribbean integration, while well-intentioned, has framed perhaps unrealistic expectations within our respective populations. It has also perhaps unintentionally diminished the genuine strengths of our existing arrangements. an association of independent states bound not by uniformity, but by shared purpose, mutual regard, and a deep history of collaboration. CARICOM is not, and has never claimed to be, a political union. Our treaty does not mandate a singular foreign policy or a supranational authority. And because we are sovereign states, each accountable to our own electorates, we will at times assess risks differently, sequence priorities differently, or interpret geopolitical opportunities differently. That is not evidence of the weakness of our association. This is the natural expression of sovereign democracies navigating an increasingly turbulent global environment.
In recent months, the Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister, Kamala Persad-Bissessar, has described CARICOM as not being a reliable partner, citing poor management, weak accountability, among other issues. Her address, therefore, to the summit was the most anticipated, particularly given her open public support for the United States and its military action in the region in dealing with the illegal drugs trade.
The military action by the American military in the Caribbean caused, you know what happened in our country? Caused our murder rate to decrease by 42%. You know what that meant? There were 257 less murders in TND. I can say thanks again to President Trump. And thanks again to Secretary Rubio, Marco Rubio. I thank them and the US military for the cooperation and what they shared with us for national security matters. Maybe in your islands, you don't have the kind of crime we have. I know Prime Minister Houghton, as we tried to pass the Oswald bill in Trinidad, we were not as fortunate as you in the parliament, but I know you have done well with your murder rate. So some of us, the crime is so bad. I cannot depend on just my military, my protective services, and certainly from you in the CARICOM, many of you do not have military or large police services to help us down there. So again, I repeat, you know, in Trinidad there's a saying, who vex lost? But we gained from the help, I'm saying, that military help, and I will welcome them again. So we changed the policy and we were able to bring those murders down by 42%. As I said, that's 257 less people who would have been dead had we not taken that course of action.
But she widened her comments to deal with the situation in Cuba, where she believes the absence of democracy and not US policies are behind the current situation facing the Cuban population.
Let me remind me and us, every single leader in this room was elected by a free and fair democratic election. Everyone in our countries. And so I ask, why do some CARICOM governments and political parties believe that they and their parties and their supporters should have the right to contest democratic elections to choose them as leaders, but the Cuban citizens have no right to free and fair election? And whilst I talk with you, Prime Minister Holness, I empathize with the people, the good people of Cuba, but there's a regime that's a dictatorial one, and none of us want that in our country, not one of us. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here today. We were all elected by free and fair elections. And so we cannot advocate for others to live under communism and dictatorship, but we want to live here in our CARICOM region under democracy and capitalism. That's an oxymoron, it's a contradiction. For ourselves, we want free democracy, but tell the Cuban people, okay, we feel sorry for you. It can't work. And as you said, Prime Minister Holness, we have to find a mechanism for the humanitarian efforts of the people of Cuba, but at the same time, we cannot, and I will not, Trinidad and Tobago will not support a dictatorship in Cuba or anywhere else.
Among the guests attending the ceremonial opening of the CARICOM Summit on Tuesday night was the Trinidad-based Caribbean political analyst Derek Ramsamudge. And I asked him to put into context the statements made by both Prime Minister Holness and Prime Minister Prasad Bisesa.
I think we have witnessed a conversation that shows the contradictions amongst the CARICOM leaders. Clearly, their position of being independent sovereign states above and beyond any sort of U.S. influence is what is certainly being questioned today. We did have some commonalities when it comes to the environment, climate finance, invested in human capital. So there were some common themes. However, it is clearly evident the U.S. is influencing the position. We saw a lot of political spin by certain prime ministers trying to justify a position. I suspect there are many detailed conversations behind closed doors. And I think the Caribbean will be tested in the next 48 hours as we expect the U.S. influencers to arrive.
And do you expect, coming out of that meeting with Marco Rubio on Wednesday, do you expect the Caribbean to be much more fragmented?
The question is not fragmented, and that's what was put forward. The question is whether they can maintain their sovereignty as individual states and have any sort of CARICOM consensus. That is what is at risk. Whether or not you can have CARICOM consensus, you're talking about Cuba, but you have failed in Haiti. You have failed to basically deal with the poverty, deal with the governance in Haiti, who is a full member of CARICOM. And the migration issue next to Jamaica from Haiti is also a real and present danger. So there's a level of mixed messages expressing concern over Cuba and wanting to deal with those matters, but abdicating a sense of a solution. Yes, you can say that solutions were tried and they have not succeeded, but that does not mean you cannot restructure how you deal with the CARICOM matter.
But even as he made clear he was not getting involved in the politics, the CARICOM chair and Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Dr. Terence Drew, urged his fellow leaders to come to the aid of Cuba.
Cuba's population is anywhere from 9 to 12 million people. Excluding Haiti, the rest of CARICOM does not amount to 10 million people. Therefore, if a state within our community is so destabilized, it will affect all of us in the region. And as a matter of course, it is important that the community looks at the humanitarian issue in Cuba, treats it extremely seriously, and the community must serve as a conduit to ensure that there is communication and dialogue between the forces that be, so that the best opportunity can be had. And so I ask the community that even though the situation might be daunting, we have a collective effort to make to stabilize our region. I must give full disclosure. I studied in Cuba. I lived in Cuba for 7 years. I have friends there. I have people who are like family to me. They reach out to me and tell me of their difficulties. Food has become terribly scarce for some. Access to water has been challenging. Garbage fill the streets. Houses without electricity. I can only feel the pain of those who treated me so well when I was a student. I can feel their challenges and their difficulties. I do not get involved in their politics, but as a matter of humanity, it is challenging I will say it is almost impossible not to feel the pain that the pain that is conveyed to me in messages and calls from.
The U.S. Secretary of State is expected to hold a bilateral meeting with Prime Minister Prasad Bisesa after meeting collectively with the other regional leaders during his 2-hour visit.
Yes, and a very interesting state of play going on, the back and forth amongst leaders right here in the Caribbean as it plays out, of course, before our eyes. No doubt we would love to be flies on that wall, hearing what the conversation is like right about now, especially, of course, what is going on in respect of that back and forth between Trinidad and Tobago and the rest of the region. Of course, we heard also from somewhat of an apologist in that of Mr. Andrew Holness, the Prime Minister of Jamaica, almost suggesting that, we never had any or there is no need to have a common foreign policy amongst member states of the Caribbean. Interesting juxtaposition to make, given the fact that, of course, we are dealing with a particular common and shared experience across the Caribbean. I think no place has experienced the extent of colonization and the impact of colonization as has the Caribbean. And that, of course, has crafted a particularly poignant position that we have in terms of how we therefore must relate to the rest of the world. And one would think that this commonality, of course, would ensure that we have some congruence in terms of our broad vision and our approach to the rest of the world. But according to Mr. Holness, that is not necessarily the case. So, of course, very, very interesting how that is playing out right about now. And we, of course, are hoping to see what comes out of some of these meetings. Already, of course, you heard that in the case of Trinidad, some special and differentiated treatment in that the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago met in a bilateral with that of the U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. And I think there are even suggestions that Prime Minister Bisesa will, in fact, later on very soon meet with President Donald Trump, no less. So it is certainly a very, very remarkable time in the Caribbean community. That's our dish of the day. And we, of course, are going to take in our weather report at this time.
The Daily Dish.
Sets, mixes and ground. Everything you need is on the house out. For the best price and the latest style. Take a little drive down to Island Style car. We got the time to make you go. We got the time to make you say, quality, price, service, choice. It's all an Island Style. Visit us at our showrooms in Bellarosa, Rodney Bay, on the John Compton Highway, Cass Street, and behind Ruby's Gas Station on the Library Viewport Highway. So call us on 450-452 or 453-TILE. Island Style, Tile and Bath. When you think tile, think Island Style.
This is Radio Caribbean International. It's now time for the weather news.
And so let's go to the 1.1. It's now time for your weather report as of 12 noon today, presented by Island Style, Tile and Bath. The forecast for St. Lucia Valley for the next 24 hours. Winds will be blowing from the east near 23 miles per hour or 37 kilometers per hour with a few gusts. The weather fair to partly cloudy and breezy with a few brief showers. And there is an advisory in here which reads small craft operators and sea beavers are advised to exercise caution due to brisk winds and locally rough seas. The forecast for Little St. Antilles, fair and breezy, becoming cloudy at times with a few light showers. And the weather summary, the Atlantic high pressure system will maintain moderate to brisk easterly winds and locally rough seas across the eastern Caribbean region during the next few days. Patches of low-level clouds drifting along the wind flow will cause some showers over the island chain during the forecast period. And this has been the weather forecast as of 12 noon today, presented by Island Style Talamba.
This has been RCI's Weather News. For more information, call the Weather Hotline at 454-3452. RCI 101 number 1.
Island style. We got the time to make you go. We got the time to make you say, yeah. We'll have to make the right choice. Island style. We got the time that will make you happy. Island style. Oh yeah. We make your dream come alive. In Island style. We have tiles and tin sets, mixes and ground. Everything you need is on the outside. For the best price and the latest style. Take a little drive down to Island Style car. We got the time to make you go. We got the time to make you say, yeah. Quality, price, service, choice. It's all at Island Style.
Visit us at our showrooms in Bellarosa, Rodney Bay, on the John Compton Highway, Cass Street, and behind Ruby's Gas Station on the Library Viewfort Highway. So call us on 450-452 or 453-TILE. Island Style, Tile and Bath. When you think tile, think Island Style.
And welcome back to the lunchroom here at Radio Caribbean International. Of course, the number to call in to tell us what's on your plate today, it is 452-3046. Again, 452-3046, as well as our WhatsApp number. That is 284-6001. 284-6001. Let's go to the phone lines at this time. Good afternoon. Welcome to the lunchroom. And what's on your plate today?
Mr. George.
How are you doing, caller?
Not too bad.
Wonderful.
I said she will go.
Sorry.
That Camilla, you say you go past that. But Trinidad, she said about 6,000 died last year in Trinidad. Trinidad always, a lot of people always die. And that was for drugs. I live in Trinidad from 1960, and I left 62 to go to United States. Tell you, it's because they have a gun. It's gang warfare, and I want Camilla B said to go back to the time of Boise Singh, Samuel Jacob. All those people were gang leaders, and the people work for them. They go in the Gulf of Carrera, waiting for the Venezuelans to come and sell the cocoa and coffee and gold. When they're going back, they will kill them and take all the money they're going back in Venezuela. And because Trinidad is very near Venezuela on that side, if they have to go to Carapano or Caracas, it'll take them days. But it just take them a few hours from Venezuela to Trinidad. So they sell the goods in Trinidad, buy other things to take back to Venezuela. So that killing, most of the killing is Trinidadian always believe in killing. And they kill a lot of people as well in their own country. Gang, warfare, and everything. So that Camilla, when she said that is drugs, that time there was no drugs. There was no drugs. Nobody takes drugs. They might take a shot of rum or whatever, but they don't take drugs, and they were still doing much killing in Trinidad. So what she's saying about drugs, she better go and hide her face. And the other thing, I move back to Cuba now. In Cuba, during the time of Batista, the people, the Americans go on the boat, the big boat, and go down to Cuba, and they say, we're going to the land of the whore. That's how they used to call Cuba under Batista, the prophet. And God Castro saved the people of Cuba. You see, a lot of them didn't have education, but they are the people educating the rest of the Caribbean now. Cuba, you see there. And America never liked what happened in Cuba there. They invade Cuba. When they invade Cuba, Cuba send them all back in black bag. Send them the battle of Bay of Pig. They send them back to America. And America never like that. And what America can do to destroy Cuba, they will do it right now. Good afternoon, Mr. George.
Thanks very much for that intervention, caller. And of course, we always appreciate your point of view. And of course, this ongoing matter of is certainly testing the resolve and the positions of the Caribbean for a very, very long time. Of course, it's interesting that Mrs. Prasad Bissessa is now a great advocate of capitalism and democracy, one of the major players supporting the development of the Caribbean right now. And many of the Caribbean countries, including Trinidad and Tobago, is that of China. And I think we all know that China has been a country that has espoused a communist social governance in their systems for a very long time, and that has always been the the duplicity of some of these positions that are brought forward in respect of how to treat and deal with countries that have communist forms of government. And we've seen the same with other rising stars, the likes of Vietnam, for example. We saw an entire war involving the United States and others in Vietnam. And Vietnam today is one of the emerging markets and rising stars of Asia. They have not yet changed their form of governance. Of course, in the case of China, they changed their economic model, but did not change their form of governance. And so it is certainly interesting how we are now, of course, hearing about the need for democracy in Cuba being brought forward as how to now deal with this and to justify the actions that are being taken against the Cuban people in the name of democracy. We've seen this matter play out so very many times when governments have been toppled, when governments have been, regimes have been removed and changed, and the difficulties that have befallen many of these countries over the years. Quite often, the power vacuum is so severe that these countries take a very long time to ever get back up on their feet. And we can think of how things are perhaps playing out in areas like Afghanistan. We're seeing how things are playing out in places like Libya. Major challenges there. Syria, of course, another area where I've seen a civil war going on, the desire to remove the Assad family, or the Ba'athist parties that have existed in that region, in Iraq and in Syria. And we're seeing, of course, the efforts of regime change does not always lead to the kind of results that we, in fact, perhaps think will come of these types of actions. Of course, it is a very complicated state of play. We are dealing with Haiti, and that point was being made as well in that clip we listened to, that we have a situation right now in terms of Haiti, and really the absence of good governance and the absence of a proper democratically elected government in Haiti right now, and the rise in impact of crime and criminality. We would love, could you just imagine that we have been for a very long time requesting support to deal with the security issue in Haiti. And the security issue in Haiti has been at a deplorable state, and to the extent that gangs effectively control sections of the country, sections of the capital. And there were appeals being made to send in a force, send in a security force, provide some kind of support there. And I think it was only the Kenyan government which eventually came on board to be able to provide boots on the ground in terms of that situation with respect to Haiti. Yes, we've seen the U.S. get involved in the past. This time around, they don't seem to want to be necessarily sending in forces to be present, but it would have been interesting to see, well, could there not have been this level of great interest in the case of Haiti, as opposed to what we're seeing play out in respect of Venezuela? Well, that is still another matter that we're going to be seeing, and how it is in fact going to be eventually resolved. But of course, the ability for the Caribbean to begin to deal with its own security concerns is certainly something that we are going to have to be talking about in the long run. And as we speak of security, what is very, very apparent is that we can no longer believe that we're going to be secure if we cannot, in fact, ensure that there are certain key systems that we are protecting. And the matters of food security and energy security are some of these very, very critical objectives that the Caribbean needs to very greatly address. Are we going to wait for another crisis in terms of the world, in terms of oil and gas, for us to decide that it's time to really make that major shift in terms of having energy independence, to the extent that we are not dealing with these significant shocks? Cuba is a good example of that. What happens when somebody decides that they are no longer going to supply you with oil or diesel or whatever you may be utilizing to support and supply and run your power plants and put into your vehicles? What happens in those types of situations? Who do you have that you can turn to that in fact would be able to provide and provide that kind of support? So these types of issues are critical issues. Energy security is a very critical issue. Europe is facing that right now. They were highly dependent and continue to be highly dependent on Russia for their oil and gas, and in particular getting natural gas from Russia. Russia, of course, we know is one of the wealthiest countries that you can find in terms of mineral resources. And I think one estimate places it as, in fact, the richest country in the world in terms of just the resources that they have, the value of those resources, right? And then you have Europe, the rest of Europe, very much tied towards the fortune of Russia to be able to support and supply them. Now, of course, we have seen how that has been a tremendous risk for Europe if Russia decides, hey, we're no longer going to provide you with gas. We're going to turn off your lights. And what happens then? So, definitely the matter of energy security is something that we have to take very, very seriously as a country and as a region. Of course, we are seeing some efforts at play right now. I mean, for example, ongoing efforts across the some of the Eastern Caribbean countries to look at the matter of geothermal energy. In the case of Dominica, right now, in fact, I think this month, they're hoping to, in fact, see the commissioning of a geothermal power plant in Dominica up at Loda in the Roseau Valley, in the upper Roseau Valley. And of course, that's a major game changer for a small island state like Dominica. They have, in some regards, been better off than us. And that is in part because they use hydro as well. Over the years, they did maintain some systems, hydro systems, as well as that of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So they did have some diversity in their energy production compared to St. Lucia. But of course, now with a geothermal plant coming on stream in Dominica, that certainly is going to help them in reducing their reliance on oil and diesel that is coming from abroad, and of course places them in a very, very good position for the long run. Many of these islands, of course, similar geology. They, of course, are all volcanic islands, and the early studies have been done over the years by even the U.S. Department of Energy have indicated that there should be quite a lot of potential by way of the geothermal power that can be sourced from under the ground, subsurface. And Dominica, perhaps very well placed because it is one of the most recent, volcanically recent islands, very young island in comparison to most of St. Lucia, older geology here. But they certainly have been able to take that plunge, and many others are doing so. I mean, in Guadeloupe, of course, they've had a system running for some time, and even islands like Nevis are having that conversation as well, because this is, of course, a really important potential game changer for small island states if we can, in fact, achieve greater generation from within ourselves, within our own countries. That certainly, alongside, of course, efforts in wind and solar PV, that certainly helps tremendously, that thrust towards one, of course, reducing the reliance on fossil fuels is good for the environment, but it's also good for us from a security perspective, from an energy security perspective, and not having those reliances in great measure. No doubt, Cuba wishes that it could perhaps have a lot more by way of production of energy from natural resources, from renewable energy sources. They've done their part, but again, topography and geology of Cuba may not necessarily lend themselves too much to that of geothermal. Very different geology there, but certainly maybe a greater emphasis has to be placed in looking at things like wind and solar in countries like Cuba as well. So the Caribbean, definitely we have some resources, and we definitely have to make better use of those resources. That sort of interconnectedness, of course, which once existed, which saw Venezuela, and of course the vision of Hugo Chavez that saw the broader Caribbean basin as being one, and of course the ability for all of the Caribbean to enjoy the resources that were available within that Caribbean sphere, of course, came to the idea of Petrocaribe. And that was a dream that he had, that these islands would be able to actually benefit from this oil and concessionary terms. That was certainly frowned upon by the United States, and it was labeled, of course, as a debt trap. We've heard quite a lot of that type of narrative whenever we've seen some generosity in the parts of other countries. Certainly, China has been accused of creating a lot of debt traps, and many people believe that this is in fact how they perceive these types of investments. But of course, these are very much, in most instances, very much needed sources of expertise and capital. And right in the Caribbean, again, like you look at Jamaica and the tremendous amount of infrastructure that the Chinese have been able to support Jamaica with through concessionary loans and other arrangements, so as to, in fact, now look at a significant transformation of the Jamaican economy. And so it is, of course, a situation that you probably never have a free ride, and all countries have their own interests, as one would well imagine. But should one power be shunned against the other? And I think this is where we're seeing right now, of course, where you have shifting of influence, shifting of tides. For a very long time, the United States has been the head of a unipolar world. And certainly since the end of the Cold War, this was what we effectively witnessed. During that period of time, and certainly since about the 2000s and beyond, we have seen a tremendous growth and rise of China and Chinese influence, to the extent that we are now seeing a shifting of, or the growth of, a new pole. And one would say certainly it is perhaps always better to have a multipolar world, where no one group has greater power and influence than the other. That is the ideal, really. It makes for, if we want to talk about capitalism, if we want to talk about the ability of competition and fair play, that's how it's achieved, by ensuring that all players are able to actually compete on almost a level playing field. And unfortunately, what we've seen is a very different situation for many, many decades. It has been skewed towards a few having control over the rest. And so now, when you're seeing shifts that are occurring now, that of course you have the likes of China coming forward and coming into the mix. You now have the rise of India, potentially a significant player, world's most populous country, rising as well in terms of its own industrialization efforts, becoming a very important aspect in the global economy. And you have a Russia, which was once upon a time part of a much greater collective, which did form that second pole for a little while in the global sphere of influence. They, of course, no longer as where they were, but certainly tremendous potential for growth moving into the future. And of course, a continent that has certainly been ripped off and exploited for quite some time, that of Africa. Will we see the potential for a major pole of influence to actually come forward in that of Africa as well? And so this is a changing and shifting environment that we are seeing at play. And it is perhaps always a good idea if we can actually see a world where if one engine fails, all right, you might have another 3 or 4 engines to keep going. That, of course, is to the benefit of everybody. If we see a world that is a lot less driven by one particular direction, because we can see now more than ever how very easy the quote unquote policeman can, if unchecked, can end up being the one that is in fact bringing forward tremendous pain and suffering to those who they have been serving. And of course, the United States has generally been seen as the world's policeman. But what happens if something goes wrong in the system and that individual now all of a sudden goes rogue? That, of course, is a tremendous potential risk. So, from a global perspective, we certainly want to see, in my view, or should be wanting to see, a multipolar world, a world that is diverse, a world that has different approaches in many instances. Yes, we are all playing fairly, but of course, we are also recognizing that there are many players and there'll be many different ways of approaching things. And as well, if something fails in one, there will be opportunities for to look elsewhere in the global marketplace. That is what we are hoping to see. So certainly the Caribbean has a lot to start thinking about, and perhaps they do need a common foreign policy, hopefully moving forward, as to whether in fact this is going to be somehow meted out within the next couple of hours and weeks and months ahead is, I think one can say, anybody's guess. Well, that's our program for today here at the Lunchroom. And of course, we do hope that you'll be able to join us tomorrow for another one. We actually have some guests coming in, one guest, I think, from the Inland Revenue Department. They have an event coming up this weekend, Tax Code Saturday. And they'll be telling you about how to get your right tax code and to prepare, of course, for the upcoming end of year and the whole matter of filing. All of that will be discussed tomorrow as part of our Lunchroom program. I'm your host, Alex George Jr., saying goodbye.